It's the bonus episode of Locked On Guardians. Honey, I blew up the ace. If you listen to Friday's show, you get the joke. We will be talking about Rick Moranis all episode long. It's gonna be Ghostbusters. It's gonna be Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's gonna be Streets of Fire. On today's episode, no, it's gonna be baseball. I'm kidding. On today's episode of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Jeff. Over there is Justin. I want to thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and every day, wherever you get podcasts, even on a Saturday. We have you covered every day, more than like anyone else, right? 6 days a week so far for us doing these. We appreciate you, and we keep doing them because the numbers have been solid. So we appreciate everyone and showing their love for the show, being part of the Locked On Guardians family. This is a continuation from Friday, literally like about 10 minutes in between. So we're going to be doing what we discussed. If you listen to Friday's show, we're going to talk about the Bieber extension stuff that hopped into on The Athletic, talk about some more of those rule changes that are interesting, and some college baseball at the end. And if you're curious, yes, I do own every one of those Rick Moranis movies I mentioned at the start of the show. So, and Strange Brute too. So let's just make sure we're getting all the good ones here.
I've seen the original Ghostbusters. I did not see the last one you referenced. I've seen Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. I've seen Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And they're making a continuation of those movies, by the way. Rick Moranis is coming back. This is Locked On Rick Moranis.
It is Locked On Rick Moranis. It was interesting. I own both Ghostbusters, and as a child, I was a Ghostbuster for a few Halloweens. I still have the proton pack, the one that was like that Fisher Price one with like, pew, pew, you had the little, you put a pool noodle in the front of it. It was essentially what that proton pack was back in the day.
I was a Ghostbuster as recently as 2018. My company used to make some fireproof like pullover suit, and they looked like Ghostbuster uniforms. So as recently as 2018, I was in my 30s then, and I was still a Ghostbuster. So how about that?
I mean, I wear my glow-in-the-dark Ghostbuster shirt that every year on Halloween when I'm teaching. Like, I always throw that on before the Halloween. That's my go-to. Streets of Fire is, I think, what most would consider a cult film. But for those who like it, it can run really deep. I enjoy it. Walter Hill, same guy who made The Warriors and a bunch of 48 Hours and things like that. But it calls it a rock opera, but it isn't. We don't need to go into this. Let's get into baseball. Shane Bieber is the Ellen Aim and the Attack. I'm kidding. More references to a movie. He would totally be Michael Paré's character from that movie. Tom Cody. That's what is actually in this article. While I took that second to pull it up, is they're trying to project what guys are going to get paid and who are nearing arbitration. And I believe it was Tim Britton. I had it wrong. Tim Britton did this, and he's looking at kind of similar players. And Corbin Burns is the most expensive. They let off with Burns, and he's about they think he would average on the open market about $29 million per season. And this is where the Shane Bieber stuff comes. And we had Sully on a few weeks ago, and I love Sully, but one of our arguments when we had Sully on, maybe it was a few months ago now, was it's like it's ridiculous Cleveland isn't paying. And I'm like, well, let's also realize Shane Bieber's 28. He's an older pitcher. You don't necessarily want to pay him. That's any pitcher that type of money. Like a 10-year contract moving to the 30s. It's a high risk. And the comps for Bieber, by the way, Zach Greinke, who was able to keep it together, and Cole Hamels, who had some injury issues moving forward through the length of his next big contract. And their F wars in kind of the free agent year, 4.9 for Bieber, 5 for Greinke, 4.6 for Hamels. And, the 3-year and the 5-year matchup. And when you're looking at his overall cost, it's projecting, those two guys each got 6 years, 144, and 6 years, 147 million. So they're saying that, like, if you were to give an extension to Bieber starting this season, that he would be somewhere around 7 years, 168 million. So you're getting him till his mid 30s at a lot of money. And, if you got the money, great. I don't know how I'd feel about that contract. It'd be, I'd be happy if Bieber was locked up. Don't get me wrong, but like, there's a lot of risk for a guy who last year was viewed as like a rebound year where we all had some concerns about velocity at the start of the year, right? Like, he isn't, if you're going to give a crud ton of money to someone, it's trade for Corbin Burns and sign him because there aren't as many concerns, right, Justin?
Yes. Thank you for coming around finally on my love for Corbin Burns. We're done. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Locked On Guardians. We've accomplished all we need to accomplish. Well, I still need to get Jeff in the World Baseball Classic, but he has come around on Corbin Burns. So I've accomplished one of my two goals. I'll take 50%. Hey, hitting 300 gets you into the Hall of Fame. So if I'm hitting 500 on my two goals,
greatest hitter of all time.
That's right. I would be. Corbin Burns. 7 years, 160. Like, I think that deal gets done. Like, if they offered him 168, I'm sure he'd take it. Like, I can't imagine he wouldn't. Although, I don't know. I don't know how many. He doesn't have Scott Boras, but he is represented by Drew Rosenhaus and his agency, which is, I don't think there's a lot of guys I can name on the top of my head who in baseball who are repped by the Rosenhaus group. And Rosenhaus is kind of the Scott Boras of the NFL, right? Like, he gets guys to see. I know the NFL is a different thing. Like, guys sign extensions because of the salary cap and because there's not a lot of guaranteed money in the NFL the way there is in Major League Baseball. So it's hard to compare, but I feel like personality-wise and how he tries to challenge things, Boras or Rosenhaus is more of the Boras of the NFL. So I don't know. Do I think 168 could get it done? Probably. Part of me thinks that even if they offered that, which I don't think they will, would he still try to test free agency anyway because of what it means to players and what he can get in the open market and who his agent is? Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know. After 2020, even after 2019, if you would have told me, hey, Cleveland's going to sign Shane Bieber to a $100 million deal, or over $100 million, after 2019, I would have said, yeah. 2020, yeah, I'll take that too. But we're not really going to take anything from 2020, even though we won the Cy Young. But we're not going to, you can't take the good or bad from 2020 because there was just all weirdness in 2020. But like, if you would have told me in 2019 that he would get a $100 million deal from Cleveland, I probably would have said, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's good, that's great. And yeah, now I'm a little skeptical about that. I mean, you have a bunch of prospects coming in the way. I know there's no such thing as a pitching prospect, and all these guys, the Espino, Bybee, Williams, Cantillo, we've already seen Cantillo, Espino, and Morris already have injury issues, so all these guys aren't going to pan out. Tristan McKenzie is risky, even though he costs less. You still have a couple of cheaper guys in front of him. I don't know. I do have some reservations about giving Shane Bieber $160 million or whatever it is, but at the same time, if you have Bieber, if you have McKenzie, if you have two of the group of Espino, Williams, Bybee, Morris, Cantillo, like if you just have two of them, I feel good about that too. And you can afford to do it, right? Because the back half of your rotation is going to be cheap when you get those prospects coming up, right? So you think, okay, and McKenzie's going to go to arbitration here soon. But I also don't think because of the TV issue right now and the revenue coming from TV issue, that's going to happen either. So I think we both agree that they're not going to offer that extension, but it's an interesting idea and it's an interesting price.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting just in general, that article, when you go and you look at it, because it's like the other names mentioned. We obviously mentioned Corbin Burns, but you go through, it's like Max Fried, probably better than you think. Brandon Woodruff, who's already 30. Walker Buehler with his injuries. Framber Valdez, who's actually maybe one of the cleanest pitchers on the list. Dylan Cease, who has had it was great last year, but is kind of a one-year guy. Logan Webb with the Giants. Zach Gallen, whose comp is pretty awful because it's John Lackey. But even I guess looking at this, I hadn't realized like they did Mitch Keller. Like, he's going to break out big. I thought that was kind of an interesting one. Michael Kopech being the last one too. But it's a fun exercise, good logic behind it. We are We are not blowing up the ace, though. It seems that he is likely, probably, I would bet, going to the West Coast. Speaking of things you can get on the West Coast, that would be our good friends over at BuiltBar.com. And I got a lot of things to talk about Built Bar. One, I'm putting in an order this evening because they've got hot chocolate, and I always like things that are hot chocolate flavored. That is a win for me. Right now, cozy up with your taste buds with new Hot Cocoa Bite. So those are small ones. It's a quick bite, and 80 grams, or 80 calories, 80 grams, man, do it again, 80 calories, 8 grams of protein, 5 grams of sugar. Tastes like hot cocoa. But also, let's do a quick rundown of the Sweet 64. Banana cream pie, peanut butter brownie. It's peanut butter brownie there for me. Cookie dough bar, cookie dough puff. I'll go cookie dough bar. Coconut or coconut marshmallow puff. I'm going to go coconut marshmallow puff. Churro, salted caramel, going churro. Brownie batter puff. Coconut brownie chunk. You got to go with the coconut brownie chunk. Double chocolate, lemon dip cheesecake. Go with that double chocolate. Mint brownie puff versus mint brownie. I'm going to go mint brownie, but I haven't tried either. Maple donut or cookies or cream. Go cookies and cream. They are doing, if you go and fill out your own your own voting right now, you can get a 12-bar mix box at 15% off, or you can always get that using that promo code LOCK15, or you can go to Sam's Club or Walmart and try it today. New rules. Do you want to jump in? I mean, this is where they test everything out in the minors, so it's important to see what they're changing because it's the future of rule changes in the majors.
Am I the only one around here gives a crap about the rules? I'm bringing that back from Friday too. If you can bring back other stuff from Friday, I'm bringing that back until everybody gets the reference. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Some of the rules in the minor leagues, I don't love some of these. So the one that we haven't really talked about, and I just saw somebody else on Twitter, and I'm not going to take credit for the idea, but somebody else brought it up, and I thought it was a good point. Pitch clock and the pitch clock and the pitch intercom thing, the pitch com. They haven't had the pitch com in AAA, and they had the pitch clock. How does that affect? How does the pitch com affect the pitch clock? Like we've seen a couple guys in spring training where they've had that issue, technology issues with the pitch com, and that's not something they have to worry about in the minor leagues yet. They haven't tested that, so that's another thing I didn't think about. But pitch com is coming to AAA, which is good, but they're reducing the pitch clock to 14 seconds instead of 15 seconds. Is it with runners on base? Is that what it was?
And then it's a little bit longer with runners on base. It's like they're reducing it with no runners on, and then there is one for runners on base as well. Like it varies depending if someone's on base or not, too.
It's 18. Okay, so it's going to be 19 seconds with runners on. From AA down, it will be 18 seconds. In the big league, it's 20. So with runners on, no runners on, they're talking 14 seconds. So right now in the majors, it's going to be 15 seconds with no runners on and 20 seconds with a runner on. And they're going to move it to 19 seconds with a runner on in AAA and AA. It's going to be 18 seconds with 14 seconds for both with no runners on. Why are we cutting down one more second? I think if anything, excuse me, I'm okay with the pitch clock rule. It works. It'll be fine. People will stop freaking out once the players and the umpires kind of get used to things they haven't had to get used to before. I think we won't see a lot of issues because you and I have said time and time again on the podcast that we've seen minor league games and there's just very minimal issues caused by it. So it's not going to be as big a deal as people think. I think it's going to be a good thing, but I would argue like you could probably give a few more seconds back, like 22 seconds with a runner on and 16 or 17 seconds with nobody on instead of the 15. Like why is it going in the other direction? I'd be curious to see what their studies are. They don't have any reasoning on here as to why they're doing this. This is just we're going to try this one. I don't know why. Why is it shorter? I would like to hear reasoning or some science behind it, other than just trying to make it quicker because
they're just trying to get quicker. I think it's just the quickness. They want to get the game faster. Though. I know that they just want to they want to see just how fast they get it down. They want to figure out what is the optimal. And I think it's just tinkering. It's a lot of tinkering. It's interesting how much they're going to use the minors as science fair time, right? Like this is just we're going to test everything out.
Yeah, and I get that. It's fine. It's just, and I know people are saying, oh, I don't want less baseball. It's not less baseball. It's more action in the time you're there. It's less downtime, which I am totally on board with. It's just, why not? Why can't we see how this, I don't know. I just want an explanation of why they've decided that they need to make a further adjustment to this rule, like, and cut it down. Like I said, I think if anything, maybe give them a little time back. We're not talking crazy, but like 2 more seconds might help avoid a lot of these situations where you've got a player who has to be looking at the pitcher with 8 seconds left. Like, you have to be focused on the pitcher and the hitter at 8 seconds left. If you give like a second or 2 back, that'll probably happen. Like, it'll be fine. And you won't see, because, it does cause a longer disruption. Let's be honest. If there is a pitch clock violation where you have to issue a walk or a strike or a ball, it does take more time, because in a lot of cases you'll have a pitcher who is like getting into his windup, but he isn't like gone, and then the clock goes whatever, and the umpire stops play. Well, guess what? You got to reset and do it all over again. That takes up more time. Just let the player go through his windup, and you still get the same and desired effect. So if anything, I think you need to add a second back. So I don't know. I just hope they have an explanation for this at some point.
Yeah, I unfortunately I don't have a good answer. I just feel like that, each of these is testing, and it's going to see like, oh, does it have a positive effect? Does it have a negative effect? I think they're just going to keep messing with things. And I think we're going to see changes every year. We might see times go up next year. We might see them go down. They're just going to continue to have, they're just going to continue to tinker. And I feel that is part of the rules. Are they? I was trying to remember. Are they also messing with bases again down there too? Didn't I see somewhere?
Well, the base size will be bigger, and the one thing I do agree with they're actually going to do is, what was the rule? Oh, not agree with, but they're going to do that pie slice thing where they do like a triangle cut over second base, and it's going to go out towards the outfield, and it's going to show where the infielders can't go. So if you're watching, I'm making like a V. It's like a pie slice that goes into second base, and it goes out as a carrot like looking thing to the outfield, and it's going to show where infielders can't stand. I don't know. I guess we'll see if that really helps. I don't think teams are going to really be trying to circumvent the shifting. They don't want guys starting too close to the base or whatever, but I don't know. That's not that big of a deal to me.
No, and we're going to get more with the automatic strike system, which I'll be curious. I'm always curious to see how that goes. The chance for less, Angel Hernandez and show is always a good thing.
Right. Well, they could just eliminate a lot by firing him, but then he'd sue him. So, I don't know. The automatic ball strike thing, I think it's a long time coming. I hope it's coming, because I don't know. I think there's still a lot of kinks to be worked out. I will say, like, the pitch clock thing, I think we've seen it work in the minor leagues, and I think the automatic ball strike thing, we've seen there's still a lot of things to work out. So more testing is good in that respect. The only thing I am concerned about is, you're messing with some of these prospects' careers, right? Like, these guys are in the minor leagues. They're trying to make it, and I know the percentage is low, but when you keep testing these rules out and you have faulty technology, or you're like, oh, this rule doesn't work. Well, how did it affect this prospect? Like, did it, I mean, I think teams are smart enough to take the noise out when they're evaluating guys to not let rules impact them. So maybe I'm not making a really good point here, but with things like the pitch clock, I think more for pitchers, the automatic ball strike thing, like, does it change their stats? Like, bad walk rates, bad strikeout rates, like, those things affect pitchers. And if you've got a faulty technology, and a lot of teams run algorithms and projections through their analytics department for guys, and if they plug in that a guy, has a couple more walks because of, a faulty technology system for automatic ball strike, does that impact his career at all? I like I said, I assume teams are smart enough to signal or to filter out the noise with some of that stuff, and they have their own cameras in the ballpark and stuff like that. And maybe if you're missing that close, it's not a big miss anyway. But I don't know. I do wonder if it does impact some players in a negative way, that you're going in there and just kind of treating it like a science lab where these guys are trying to develop and try to have careers.
Yeah, I get that. It definitely, while they're messing with things, it could mess with someone's career. Speaking of careers, do you need to hire people? Do you need new staffers? I know as a teacher, we can never have enough teaching aides, but across industries, we know this is the case. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. So you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's super easy to create a job on LinkedIn. Just add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to get the candidates with the skills you need, so you can prioritize who you want to interview and who you want to hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality candidates versus their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnMLB. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnMLB to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Time to talk college baseball. I talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show. This year, the top of this class is getting super strong. Right now, when you look at Dylan Cruz, Wyatt Langford, Chase Dollander, who may not even be the best Chase on his team. That's how good Chase Burns has been. Paul Skeens and Jacob Gonzalez. Like that's a pretty sweet top 5 college guys. And, depending on how you look at Max Clark, it's really about 6 elite players. And someone's going to slide. Someone always does. Someone's going to pop. Guys like Brendan Taylor wouldn't shock me if they moved up high. It is a super deep group. Yet saying all of that, I'm not going to get his name right. Caglione.
Oh my gosh. So fun. What a fun.
On top of being just a doing everything type of listen, Vance Honeycutt had the #1 overall pick locked up for next year. Then Jack came along, and he's a pitcher, he's a hitter. Joe Doyle had a great fact that if he is on pace to get close to the all-time single season home run record for NCAA baseball, which is just unbelievable. He's on pace to hit 44 home runs this year. Caglione is, and
I thought it was 45.
What?
I thought it was 45.
Is the record? Yeah, I mean he's close. But the record was in 70 games. He did it in more games. But it's also that was when we had different baseballs that went further. That's when you could doctor your bat to the nth degree. That is a record that no one should be able to approach because the conditions in the 80s with Pete Incaviglia. Thank you. It was a different world. He was a redshirt senior at the time. Very different world. And the fact that, by the way, Brock Wilkin from Wake Forest, which, yes, it is very much a hitter's park there, in spite of how good the pitchers do. Wilkin was one of those guys who some people thought could be the top overall pick after his freshman year. He was up there with Dylan Cruz and had a bit of a stumble as a sophomore, but man, that guy has some exit velocities for days. Just looking at that top 10 list, I mean, tied at third is Tristan Cassis' brother, Gavin, who transferred to South Carolina this year. That's another fun story. There's just so many players performing. There's so many guys. I mean, Cleveland, I still say, Jerron Watts Brown makes way, way, way too much sense. And if you want the hitter version, that's Matt Shaw of Maryland, who I think is currently hurt, who also lit it up on the Cape. But, next year's class, Honeycutt, Caglione, Braden Montgomery. I know I'm blanking on a few others, but it is these last 2 classes have been
Chase Burns next year.
Isn't Chase Burns is a freshman, isn't he?
No, Chase Burns is a sophomore.
He
finished last year. He's eligible next year.
But yeah, it's going to be a really fun 2 years here, and I got to sit there and start going through my lists and kind of compiling them. Obviously, I'm not spending too much on next year outside of just watching the players who are fun. But yeah, it's been a fun college baseball season. The high school group is maybe a little weaker this year. And I think I don't even know if I want to say it's weaker. It's just, I think as we get more data, and we get more information, I think we're going to see a lot more college players just be a premium placed on that.
Yeah, I mean, the college classes the last few years have been really exciting. There were some good hitters. I mean, the strength of the 2022 class was college bats, right? That's why a lot of teams went that way. That's why Cleveland went that way, because they had a guy in the ranks they were interested in.
And the year before it was college pitchers, and Cleveland went that way. And this year it's
Right,
just college talent.
It is, yeah. I mean, again, I don't have your depth of knowledge and your history on college on draft stuff. I've gotten into it more the last 3 years, going back to 2020. Again, I've said this on the show a couple times. My view on Cleveland is like, yeah, they're willing to take risks, but I think they are always looking for the inefficiency when it comes to the draft and exploiting and going after what's there, where the strength is, and always trying to find if there is an efficiency to be exploited, they'll take it, like a Spino or a Hankins or a Williams, things of that, DeLauder, things of that nature. So there is that. As far as players go, I mean, I've been keeping a running tally of guys too, so I can try to keep up with you mostly. Jerron Watts Brown's the top of my list for college pitchers. We talked about Tanner Hall. And we've talked about some of the Wake Forest guys too. I don't think Rhett Lauder will get there. And you've talked about how there's not a whole lot of juice to be squeezed out of those guys when they get out of Wake Forest, which is not typically Cleveland style. They look for pitchers who they can develop further. Like, that's why they took all those Florida guys, which we've said before. But I kind of wonder, like, okay, Sean Sullivan I don't think he's your typical Wake Forest guy, because let's remember, he was also a transfer. It wasn't like he had spent multiple years there. He is a transfer from Northwestern. So I don't know. Does that change the calculus at all? I mean, because if you look at him just as a pitcher, the data, the delivery reminds me a lot of Logan Allen. They also, Cleveland also likes to look for specific not specific arm slots, but things that make their pitch data a little more interesting. So I know you've said your feelings on Wake Forest pitchers before, but does him being a transfer, change your thoughts, or at least give you a little bit more to go on there, rather than just the usual, Wake Forest guys don't develop in the majors because they're already kind of a finished product and they haven't really worked out well at the major league level?
Yeah, I mean, the transfer component, and like, he wasn't, he did get some Cape experience, but it was very little. And Tabor Academy, Mike Vasili a few years ago came from there. That's the school in Massachusetts to go to, it seems like, if you're a pitcher. The performance is there. It feels like by the time they would come around to him, that he might already be gone. And I don't know, maybe this is in my head. You can correct me if I'm wrong in this or not. It feels like they don't take a lot of those starter reliever types. Like, they take guys who are starters, who are stretched out, who they know can hold up, especially kind of with those earlier picks.
The earlier picks, yeah, I was gonna say, because
in the first 3 to 4 rounds, Leftwich was a reliever, but
Franco Aleman was not really a specific role guy. I would argue. I mean, they took guys like Gio Rivera and Javier Santos Tejada last year, who I would argue, I mean, they're prep guy, or they're community college and prep guys, so it's a little bit different. But they don't have defined roles. But I suppose that's a little bit different. No, not the early picks. That's for sure.
I feel like there's a chance he could be like, I don't know, I think he's going in the first 3 rounds. Maybe I'm wrong in that.
Who? Sean Sullivan?
Sean Sullivan, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not talking about a first pick. Not talking about the first round overall. I mean, if you want to get in the first round overall, I think you've already kind of mentioned some of the guys. The other guy I've been looking at too, who is kind of a transfer as well, is Grand Canyon Zach Thornton. And Cleveland's already got a Zach Thornton in their system. But so far this year, Zach Thornton, another lefty pitchability guy who gets into the low 90s from Grand Canyon, 38 strikeouts, 2 walks in 24 2/3 innings. He was a JUCO guy at Barton Community College for 2 years, where he was pretty darn good. Last year, 109 whip at 2.63 ERA, 91 strikeouts, 26 walks, 78 2/3 innings. Interesting arm slot. So Zach Thornton's a guy I put on my list. We've already talked about Tanner Hall plenty. Noah Hall from South Carolina, to me, makes a little bit of sense. And I don't know, Jackson Baumeister's another guy too, who had control issues on the Cape, but
Florida State doesn't develop well.
Well,
So
that's the point, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So that's
Same
a
thing
guy
with
that has more
Carson
juice to squeeze.
Carson Montgomery as well. Like Carson Montgomery, I think was my high. I'd have to go look at the list. He might have been I believe he's the highest rated prep pitcher to get to college. Like, I mean, Florida State had a heck of a haul with Montgomery and Bumgarner, and they don't have a lot to show for it. And teams have done well. And I mean, Cleveland drafted from Florida State last year.
And they had a couple guys taken from their team, their pitching staff last year. Two had Tommy John. It was Hubart and who else?
I'm blanking. I got to be honest.
Was there somebody else?
I just knew Hubart had, but it's the developmental history there has not been great. So I do think, that's a bonus when you're the Guardians, right? You're kind of thinking there's more growth potential, and I would be curious to see either of those guys in Cleveland. Go ahead.
You look at it as a thing like, okay, Cleveland is confident and has the history of being able to do this kind of stuff. So you can look at it as at some of these guys in a different way than other teams can, because they see this type and they see, okay, this is not a player we can develop. This is a guy who is missing XYZ from his game that we don't think is worthy of drafting here. But Cleveland sees XYZ as things they can develop and change and get more out of this guy. So they're able to take guys like this and realize and feel confident in what their plan is and what they feel like their play development can do with him, and see things that other teams don't see. It's kind of like, when you're searching for a house, right? And you're looking for houses and you don't see any furniture or any layouts in the house sometimes, or maybe you have to renovate a house. If you don't have an eye for this is what the house looks like before renovations and what it could look like after you're done. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't have the eye for that, it's hard for you to visualize it without actually doing it. The Guardians have an eye for this kind of stuff, or things they can fix with pitchers, or what they can add to their tool belt and make them better. So they have that sort of structure in place to be able to see the future with these guys, and teams, I'm sure, all do, but Cleveland just happens to have a good reputation and history for doing this. So maybe it's a little easier for them to identify guys like this where maybe other teams would pass them by because of those things.
And I think, to give it the local flair, I think you do have to look at Isaiah Coupe as well. I know he had that 1-6 walk game, but he's got 7 walks total this year. So outside of that one, and again, that was probably the best competition he faced, but strikeout rate over 13, ERA of 0.5, 2 secondary offerings that get close to 3,000 RPMs. He's undersized, but the other thing we've seen at Cleveland is, like, did they freak out when Chase DeLauter was terrible against those Florida State pitchers? No, they don't get. They're not going to get shifted by a player not playing well in their one big premium matchup. They don't mind undersized. They like athletic. They like guys who can spin it, and they like guys with growth. Ohio State, Justin, who was the last hyper effective Ohio State player, baseball wise, in the majors?
Nick Swisher?
Yes.
Ooh, that's bad. Yeah, there hasn't been Ohio State. I'm just trying to think Big Ten in general.
I mean, Big Ten gets a guy or two every year. Like Rutgers had Brandon Lau. Tim Herron, yeah. Paul Tates is a guy at Purdue who went to the school I used to teach at. He's playing really well down there. Throw him.
You got Brody Brecht at Iowa now.
Brody Brecht. Talk about next year's class. Yeah, he's next year. He's the big pitcher to watch for next year, with Chase Burns. That's why these are, good time for your team to be awful these next 2 years. Congrats to those at the top.
Washington and Oakland locked up.
Yeah,
they're going to be happy next year.
But I think. I think Coupe is a guy to watch because Ohio State's had a few interesting guys through the years. The lefty last year, who I'm blanking on, Logan, Lonsway. It was
Seth Lonsway. Angels, right? Angels.
I'm thinking Texas in my mind, but I could be wrong. I think it's the Texas Rangers, but I could be wrong in that. But it's like Coupe was not a big name, and he is really pitching well. He did have one game as a reliever, so I got to check into that a little bit more. But yeah, I think he fits the Guardians very well.
Seth Lonsley went to the Giants in the 6th round, by the way. So we were both wrong.
Both wrong.
I had the coast right at least.
I had some consonants and vowels right. We want to thank everyone for checking out the bonus show. Tell us what players. Kyle Teal, we cursed immediately after talking about him. He immediately doubled his strikeout total on the year to 4, from 2 to 4. So we did him dirty. Who else would you like to hear us talk about? What players would you like us to dive into? Maybe a program you'd like us to discuss. Hit us up in the comments below. Thank you all for doing all you do as part of the Locked On Guardians team, and go Guardians, go.